Okay, here we go. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Dan and Toshi, two of my favorite people. I talk about these guys a lot, actually, and you know, we have a conversation that goes on almost every day about this work. Dan's obviously a co-developer of the work. Toshi really is too, though. He's so, in the work that he's, in a sense, become a co-developer. So brought these guys together today because we want to talk about something. This is something that we talk about a lot amongst ourselves. And then Dan and I have talked about it. We've posted about it in the members area. It comes from Ken Wilber's work, his stages of development work. And we focus when we talk about it, we talk about the green stage of development where a lot of us are. It's a really common stage of development, which we'll talk about when we pull this graphic up. And there's lots of really good things about this stage of human development, which again we'll talk about the good things about it. I want to say that without it, I don't know that I could have come out of the closet. I'm going to say that right off. I mean, it's really been helpful for those of us who've been gay to have this stage of development be here, so we have to remember that. That then also there are aspects of this stage of development, we're going to talk about the green stage, where we can get really stuck. And it has to do with trauma and repression, the very topics that we talk about all the time. Whether or not you're a fan of Ken's work, if you can just kind of listen with an open mind, and Dan and Toshi and I are going to try to explain in our own very non-expertise way what these stages mean. And then we're going to get back to the work of KI and talk to you about how this has unfolded for us in our lives. Because we're human, so we've gone through and are going through these various stages of development ourselves. So Dan has pulled up this graphic, and well, I don't exactly know where to start because what we're talking about this postmodern green stage that's right in the middle. And so we're going to center our conversation on that. But before we get there, if we talk about some of the stages leading up to that, so if you look from the bottom up, I think we could start maybe, what do you think, Dan and Toshi, with red tribal and kind of go up. That's how we write. When we write about it, we do that. So what can we say about the red tribal stage of development, like roughly when it came in? It says 15,000 years ago. What is it that we know about that stage of development from Ken's work and history? Yeah, what do you know? What were you going to say about it, Dan? Something you've written about this.
So, yeah, the red tribal stage. I was just pulling up what we wrote here. It says on this, it says egocentric, vigilant and aggressive, impulsive, ruthless, courageous, determined, and powerful. Online for 15,000 years. So I always think of like the Vikings, when I'm thinking about the red, sort of that kind of vibe or that kind of energy of like warlike and dominating, and and let me see, I've got the
It was like a survival kind of the cultural, like how do you say, civilization wise, it hasn't still developing towards like a comfortable living, still survival to live, still have to go hunting to get stuff, right? That kind of times, like you have to really look after yourself, like you have to be aggressive, go hunting, get some food for your family, and you have to fight other people off, and like it's that kind of kind of consciousness sort of thing. Maybe that's how I kind of see it. But
yeah, and so for me, like when he says right here, egocentric, very me-centered. So that when you say it's about survival, about me, it's about feeding me, I'm surviving me. It's not even about we at that level. If you look up, the next level is about identifying more with we. This is like really me stage, is how I see this. Go ahead, Dan. What do you have to say about it?
That was what I was looking up here. So I put think epic heroes, feudal lords, punk rock folks, punk rockers, gang leaders, or kids during the terrible twos, where it's like you said, it's all about me. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a stage of development that we all have to go through, Ken says, as he studied this. So we all move through it at some point in our life. It's just part of human development. And then as we move through it, the next stage of development is traditional, or he calls amber. By the way, he says you can label the stages differently. He says you don't have to be stuck on mine. He's just how he does it. Because it's an evolution, is the way I see it. We're just evolving. Consciousness is. So consciousness has been evolving. So for example, in his words, into this stage, which is right above red, amber traditional. And I need my eyeglasses for this. But this is what I mean, like ethno or nation centric. This is where I think of was we, like nationality, our group, my group, nationhood, the values, it roles, values, roles, and discipline. This to me also is like when I think of when I grew up with what I saw as like fundamentalist Christians. I thought of this like this stage. I didn't know it, but like the really dogmatic Bible thumpers when I was growing up gay, it felt like this energy for some reason. I may be wrong about that, but that's how. How do you guys see this one?
Yeah, same. Yeah, I put fundamentalist, patriotic. They don't have a problem sacrificing themselves for a cause, God or country. Strong sense of right and wrong, and sort of some examples of them are like Puritan America, or the moral majority. You know, like in the 70s and 80s. You know.
Yeah, this is like what we fought against as going through like the green stage. I don't know about you guys when we finally get to that more progressive stage, which we're going to get to. This is the stage that I was fighting against, in my view. You know, I don't know about you guys. We'll share our own personal stories in a little bit, but we'll come back to that. Anything you want to say, Toshi, about traditional amber?
Yeah. Yeah, you say Christian, but I see that in Buddhism, any organized religions that, have to put someone up there, the order, he's the one, and just kind of give your power away, kind of that kind of energy really. Yeah.
It's also interesting regionally because here we're in the States and we're talking about Christianity being that can be in that stage. And then you're in a different culture, coming a different background, and you're talking about it in different religions. So it's like really a stage of development of humans. It's not even among the regions. Like it doesn't matter where we all have to apparently go through it. Is what
I think so. Yeah. I think we all same. Yeah, we face in the collective same kind of things, and I think I think our environments kind of shapes different things, I guess, more people from deserts or jungle or, hotter country or colder country. But yeah, in the end, I think we facing the same things. Yeah.
Right. Because when I grew up, I don't want to get too much, but I never had to worry about the dogmatic Buddhist coming after my sexuality. See what I'm saying? Like the Asian or whatever religion was over there, I didn't have to worry about that stage of development over there. So it's just interesting that doesn't even matter.
Yeah, Japan is like that. Japan is, the big religion is Buddhism, and they rule and they have the money, they control, what's right and wrong almost, in a traditional sense. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan. Do you have something?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking it's almost like the content, just like in the work, like the content doesn't matter as much as that structure of,
Yeah.
It's like this is the stage of development and the content can sort of shift or whatever, but it's
There's also this, even Ken talks about this, there's this, it's my way or the highway at that stage. It's like, it's our way, or even, it's like, if you're a Catholic, you're going to hell if you're not a Catholic, that kind of thing. That we-centered type thinking.
I guess so I guess it came from an ego-centric area when everyone was kind of individual-centric. But now, in some ways, I don't even want to use the words positive sense, but people learn to get together, start a country or whatever the areas, the community, you believe in something, you believe in a God or the order it says, So that's maybe how people got together to have a collective, I don't know, culture or whatever. Maybe that's the beginning of, the whole thing maybe. So yeah. But anyway, yeah.
Well, okay, so the transition between traditional amber and the next one is interesting because Ken talks about this, and I saw this, like, you see droves of people in college leaving their Christian backgrounds and becoming sort of more rational, scientific based. And it's like a big wave that's happened in the last 30 years, especially, where people have just left the traditional amber family background and have gone into like traditional, they're in college, they can't prove God, he doesn't exist, and now they have a different paradigm, that kind of thing. Well, I remember that too. Like that's something that I went through earlier in my life. So modern orange is, well, I don't know. For me, it's like where science takes over God. Is one way of saying it. Where rationality starts to become more important than whatever we were doing before. Like if we can't, like Ken says, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That's the problem with orange. Like you think that everything is measurable and you get too stuck there. But like that was an advancement for us to actually see that we can have a scientific, rational approach to some of these things instead of just believing my way or the highway, or my God is the God. Anyway, what do you guys have to say about modern orange?
Yeah, it's funny that you say it does remind me of college, sort of like when kids leave and go out and start actually reading and being around other people that weren't raised in their paradigm, you know. And yeah, I think I mean I've got a good friend, and I went through this too, I think, when I went to college, but I've got a good friend who was raised really fundamentalist Christian, and then it was a really strong turn that he took, and he rejected his faith, and then he really like grasped onto like humanism and atheism and the rational mind. And then I think the thing that he didn't spot during that was it was just moving from one belief system to another. Now same thing. It's like the content was this, and now it's like, well, it's not that. Now it's this. This is the new religion, you know. So it is an evolution, but it's like a, you know, you know, it's a landing, really. It's like we're gonna land on this thing instead of landing on the thing we landed on before. So yeah.
Well, also just real quick, Toshi, I want to hear from you, but like that's what Ken says. There's a limitation with that's why we develop beyond it, because we see this with a new perspective, we can see so much more, and then we get stuck there in some way. So that's what we're talking about with each of these stages. Well, go ahead, Toshi.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not much to add to what you guys said, but yeah, to me, like that's when you start like individuals like rationalizing thing, like you know, when you like in your school times, yeah, oh wow, these people are right and these people are wrong. Science is this is right, that kind of development of like what's right and wrong, and you know, what is it to have an opinion, like individual, like oh, am I a good person or bad person because this is happening? I can measure against science and all this stuff, and you know, so that kind it's interesting actually to see it like this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then okay, so I don't remember some of these transitions to these stages. I'll talk about it in a second. I don't know if you guys do, but I really remember this one of like from my own life, because I feel like I was in green like by high school. I don't know, or before, because growing up gay. So I'm really familiar with this stage. Because for a while I thought that this is the last stage. Everybody should just be here, you know. But postmodern green, since it's been such a part of my life, I'll say a little bit for like the values of equality were really, really important to me growing up because of feeling so like oppressed as a gay person. So this just felt right, you know. I'm sorry. It felt right. For a long, long time, this felt like the right view about everything. I didn't see the limitation of it. I mean, I was the civil rights activist. I was the attorney out there. So what you guys to go ahead and tell your story too. And at this point, but like this was my stage for so long. I was very comfortable here. I also got really sick here because I took some of these values so personally that I wasn't healing. So how would you characterize it apart from your personal experience, our personal experience? Let's talk about green first. What is it? I like when he talks about it, Ken talks about it as the civil rights movement starting in the 60s. That makes perfect sense to me. Gay rights, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights. We had a change of perspective. You know, when I think of it, I think of like people that were enslaved. I even think of the metaphor of the slave, and you free that slave or those people, they're going to change everything about humanity. That's going to change everything, what we learned from that. And so that's how I see it. And we learned so much from that. We changed our perspective. Some of us are not there yet, you know. But anyway, how would you describe green just generally? And then we'll talk about our personal experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, as a development, it was a huge development from modern orange, right? You know, coming to like, wow, you know, we have to treat people equally and all that stuff, like because of, you know, whatever happens in that individualism and stuff like that. And yeah, it feels more like a, you know, looking at, you know, feels, you know, on the surface, it looks like looking out for other people, like weak people, like the kind of minorities, and like, you know, because it was so concentrated on the, I don't know, whatever, it wasn't opposite of that before. So it just this kind of energy to just flat things out, I guess, in some ways, like kind of and yeah, it's yeah, I was there. I feel like I grew up in that culture very young. My household was like that. My parents were like that, and it was just a norm for me, I guess, from pretty young age, really. So
Yeah. For me, I think it was again, the college thing, but college thing, once I got there, it was like a orange kind of segueing into green, so I was sort of looking at science and also starting to realize like the equality piece, and that we need to all be loving each other and not, racism was sexism, homophobia, like rejected that categorically. Once I got to college, it was just like, this is crazy. Like I was raised in that environment. So I just, and yeah. And because I was probably raised mostly in green, because my parents were like borderline hippies, like they were into environmentalism and civil rights and peacemaking and that type of stuff. Which was interesting because my dad was in the Navy and then he was a conscientious objector. So he had that shift too, where it was like he was sort of more in the amber orange area. And then he had like a moment where he was in his A7 and they were flying over looking at like targets to drop a bomb, right? Like where, if they were going to drop a bomb, this is where you would drop it. And it was a church. That was the target, and he just had this like sort of moment of like, I can't do this anymore. So he just started to project that kind of worldview and move into the green. And so I was raised with that, and then I really started to explore it when I was like in my early 20s and get into that. And I thought, okay, this is, like Scott said, this is right. It's right. My equality and compassion and sensitivity and harmony and all that stuff, which I still think that those are beautiful principles, and I still hold those principles, but there's this very like tight clinging to them, which now I'm starting to see it was pain driven, and repression driven too, because it's like, well, we'll get more into that, but that's sort of my experience as the liberal,
It feels really like kind of hot, isn't it? For me, it's like a hot kind of juicy, like righteous, this, I'm gonna fight for that really energy, that young energy, like I had, like, it's like, this is right. And, I'm gonna help people, I'm gonna change the world. I'm gonna, all that energy that, you can really feel that, which, I didn't know it was coming from repression. We won't go into that, but like, it's, but and it's, and Japan was very kind of, when I grew up, my parents were more like kind of hippie as well. Like, so we were up against traditionalism all the time. I feel like going to demonstration and stuff, like, people see us funny, we go demonstration, anti-nuclear, anti-food stuff, to any all women's rights. And my mom used to take us and all that stuff. And because it felt like a real change, in terms of like a world kind of collective kind of energy wise as well. But shame we will, just kind of, it's, like Dan says, I still like the principles, and I resonate most of it really, but I had to use it for something that, I won't go into it yet, but I kind of, the energy of the repression and stuff.
What if I could share a little story? I feel like this sums it up for me. Is so many times I'd be sitting in a group of like my angry gay male friends, some of whom were overtly angry and some of whom were repressed, and all of them were in green. We were all in green, and Fox News comes on the TV, and now that I can look back, I can see what's happening. The ones that were repressing the saddest, they're angry, they're yelling, they're traumatized at that. That's their perspective, but they're coming from pain, like deep hurt, and they're angry at the TV, showing where that green's coming from. And then the other ones are like me, we're intellectualizing art, like we're holding back our anger, we're hurt by that, and we're explaining and everything, trying to fight back. And I'm an attorney, I'm trying to fight back in my own way, but we're all traumatized. That's the thing, we're all repressed and traumatized. So even though we had the right ideals, so to speak, we were coming from pain. And that's how I know that what we call sick green which for me came close to what I now know as covert narcissism, because it's like, I'm right. There's nothing here for me to look at. That's where I was in a way. And that's where I can understand what Ken is saying about the sick. I mean, so can we talk a little bit more about that? Like how these great values and this perspective, which we still hold true, many of these values became a source of suffering for us, where we had to like break free of that, because there are stages beyond that. You don't have to just be there anymore. Okay, so who wants to start? I mean, Dan, when I was listening to your story, I was thinking, wow, you might have been practically born into green, knowing your parents. Or like, so yeah, tell me let's hear yours first in terms, you said a little bit about it and how those great views and that self-righteousness became a source of suffering for you.
Yeah. So I think I first started to recognize that it might be a source of suffering when post college, you know, it was like, that's a really good question. When did I start to notice it? It's like, I'm trying to think here. Sorry, I'm getting thrown off. Say again, Scott, what was the question?
Well, I was saying that like for, you know, when I was sitting with my gay friends and we're just getting angry and none of us are healing, none of us are processing anything, we just think we're right. At some point that I started to notice that's the source of my suffering, you know, like, and it brought me to the non-dual path eventually. But I guess that's it. Maybe that is the question. Maybe I didn't clarify the question. It's like, when did you notice this is the source of suffering? When did you go from like, this is right, this is the way things should be, to like, at some level, this is actually this is now the source of my suffering?
Okay. Yeah. So here, it's sort of clear when it started to happen. I think I maintained it and I was really adamant and sort of earnest about it in college. And this is like in 2002, 2004, I was in college. So it was like when George W. Bush got elected and we were all the liberals going like, you know, we don't want Bush in office. He's the conservative. He's he's an idiot, all this. So anyways, that was that. And then it kind of calmed down after that for a while, probably for about 10 years or so, until in 2016 when Trump got elected. This is right when I was getting into spirituality too. Or into like inquiry and spirituality. So it kind of coincided with that. When Trump got elected, I woke up in the morning, I remember, and I thought, I felt awful. It felt like this, just like something had descended on me and on the United States, all stuff. And so anyways, all of that really I was like, I'm suffering too much about this. Like I haven't thought, you know, of course, Obama was in office for the previous 8 years, so I hadn't thought very much about anything like that. But as soon as that happened, and there was that kind of energy, the red, or the sort of red, amber, orange started to like take over and run the show again, you know. Then I felt as somebody that was more in the green stage of consciousness, I felt like oppressed and dominated at that point, right? And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is way off. Like I just have never like cared or been that disaffected by something like this before. And since I was just getting into inquiry, I started to explore it and go, could this be about something else? Could this be that this isn't what's happening right now in the country? Could this be about my childhood and what, you know, what growing up in unconsciousness and growing up with, you know, parents who were either one of them was dominating and the other one was very like possessive, and you know, could this be linked to that? And of course it was. And that's when you and I met, Scott, and we started doing this work and developing the inquiries and going, okay, wow, like it feels like because of my pain and because of my repressed emotions and the repression of self even that happened as a kid, it takes something like this in my 30s to bring that out, to make me start to turn inward and go, okay, what's really happening here? You know, is it really that the externals are the problem, or is it that there's stuff that's been untapped and unseen in my unconscious, you know, that I need to move towards? So Yeah, I would say thanks Donald Trump for starting to bring that up for me. Anyways, how about you, Toshi?
Well, that's
Um,
good. Yeah, keep going.
yeah. What's coming up for me is like this green energy for me because I live by it. That was my truth. That was my, everyone should be equal. Like, what are you talking about? What color, whatever color you are, whatever, man, woman, it doesn't matter. Like, and this hot thing that I was talking about earlier about this truth, like, this is the truth feeling, this is, everyone should know this truth and we should live by it, that kind of energy. I really didn't know until recently that that was a trauma in itself. Everything I thought the truth, what I call truth in my world, was coming from trauma because I had to do, I because I didn't want to feel something because there was something that I was triggered by it basically because of my heart. I've been hurt, right? And I was not, it was nothing to do with the whole thing. It was just about my heart, and you guys did this to me, and then I'll be triggered for people who's being racism or homophobic or whatever. It's just like I'm scanning the whole world for it, watching news. If anyone, if it, I like it flat. If anything stops up and say no, then it's like, no, that's not right. And that was coming from my fear of not being able to allow that in myself because I didn't want to feel that. And that's when you really start to see that I was never fighting for anybody else. I was never fighting for minority people. I was never fighting for the gay people, whoever the minorities. I was just fighting for myself so that I don't have to feel it. So I don't feel something that I didn't want to feel, basically. And most people, most of the reason why we get triggered because we believe in something, right? And we identified with those stories. And all we've seen is the story that we want to see, the stories that I wanted to see. And that's what the green sick greens is. It's not really about all those things that I thought I was talking about. It was just about my hurt and my repression that had to believe that. And now I'm triggered. And now I look for people who's also triggered. Yeah, so I can validate my views and all that stuff. Now be trigger people who doesn't share my thing, share my ideas. And it's just, and then I have a license to attack. You're wrong, I'm right. And what I'm saying is I'm fucking hurt. And you're attacking me. And it gives me right to call you whatever I want to call you because it's the truth. And that truth is so true because it comes from my trauma, because it comes from my heart. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I got a lot to say about this, but yeah.
Well, I was just sitting here listening to you guys. I was thinking, like, really, all that Ken is ever saying is that each stage, if you would just do process your stuff, because every stage gets stuck. If you look at those stages, like it's either really me centered or we centered, or in some way, the ego. He's saying is the thing. It gets stuck in some way. And what I hear, it's like it's so simple now that I've done this work. Is like he's just basically saying at each stage, these are great stages. We're going deeper. We're seeing more. Work on your shit. Like process your shit at every stage. Don't land on a stage and think this is it, because consciousness is developing. Like this isn't it. You're seeing through a different lens. And not as you guys were, I was like, I saw through your lens, the same lens. I'm right about this. And that's where I got stuck. That's the thing. What I think Ken is saying, the sick green is where we don't process our stuff, even though this is a great perspective that's come into the world. If you don't process your stuff, it ends up being the thing that keeps us from evolving at that point, you know? Okay, so here's my personal thing, just real quick, is I grew up, real quick, I've already told the story, grew up gay, so I already hated everybody. I was angry at everybody. That was a defense mechanism, and I buried it. I totally buried it. And then the victim consciousness came out. That's the gay rights activist. That's the gay guy who's trying to be right about everything. So then I came to non-duality because I thought that was the source of the suffering, my identity. That's what they told me. The victim, the deficiency story, but it was the buried rage under all that I never got to growing up like that. I think that's why I was so energetically drawn to the green movement, because I could be right covertly, but I didn't have to feel the anger, in some way. I could just be the victim in some way. I could just be that, and I didn't have to process my stuff. That's the thing that took it into like covert narcissism or sick green for me. So this work to me is about like undoing that stuckness at that level and hopefully moving beyond that and then taking all the good values of it, but not from pain. That's the difference. Deal with your stuff. So what do you guys think about that? Share a little bit more about how maybe KI, because KI has helped me more than anything else, has helped us move through some of this repression and trauma that's driving green.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're the first person that I ever heard say um, that we believe that whatever the belief system or whatever the ideology or whatever it is, that serves to keep us emotionally safe. Like I'd never heard anybody say that before. It's like whatever you're believing, whatever your programming is, it doesn't matter. Like earlier, I was saying the content. It really doesn't matter what the content is. If you're locked into a belief system or a worldview or a identity or something like that, that's really just serving to keep you safe from going deeper and from accessing and feeling the stuff that was pushed down and has been buried there since childhood. So as soon as I heard that, I just went, yep, that's it. And I don't know, I guess probably because I suffered a lot, but it was like I had the kind of earnestness to go, I want to like burn the house down. I want to like whatever I'm believing, whatever I've been programmed with, first of all, I want to identify it. And I can identify it by going, okay, what am I suffering about? Like, what am I suffering about? If I am, I've landed on something, on some belief system or some perspective or some worldview that ultimately I know is conceptual, but I'm using it as a way to just like stay out of my body, And so that was, yeah, that was definitely the turning point because and now I look at it and I go, God, it's so easy. Makes so much sense that our pain would co-opt these principles in the green, like the great principles of the green consciousness, like equality and love and compassion, that would co-opt that and weaponize it. um so yeah, and one of the tricky things I want to add this to about the sick green sort of consciousness is that we push community so hard. It's like be connected, stay connected with each other, be in community, which of course is great and it's very important. But like Toshi said earlier, it's like, but who am I? It's sort of like when I was really repressed and anger repressed, that's my primary repression is anger. When I was repressed in that way and I was in that green consciousness, it was like I was gravitating toward people that were also repressing their anger, but smiling and trying to be kind and compassionate to each other. Like, so we got a bunch of people, they're really angry, but don't fully know it, not fully consciously know it, but they're all like trying to be supportive and loving and kind and hold each other up and all this stuff, so it's like, that's gross to me now.
Yeah.
Like I look back at it and I go, oh God, that's like icky, gross. It feels codependent and it feels like just, so anyways, when I read, last thing I'll say is I read Anthony DeMello and he said, be careful about community stuff. He said, be careful about people that push that really hard or that thing, because he's like, you've got to, if you're in the process of deprogramming or waking up or whatever term we want to use for it, you really have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet before you go back into community. You have to be able to stand and be autonomous, And so for me, that's been, and I'm still in the process of it, but that's been the process of coming out of this repression, learning how to feel all that stuff that's, been stuck in my body for so long. And then I can really show up and I can really, connect and go and be in community if I want to, or be alone if I want to. And it's okay. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up about the community piece, because I feel like that's tricky. That can get really tricky. Yeah.
Oh, Toshi, I want to hear from you in a second in that same way, but just to clarify, because I wrote down when Dan was talking, peace, positivity, and sensitivity of the green stage of development, because those are high values of like peace on earth, equality, positivity. Those are good high values, but they enmeshed completely with my empathic nature and my traumatized, repressed ego conditioning. Just total enmeshment. So Like that's the gross thing that Dan. So just when you hear us say that, he's trying to point to something. And if you don't see it, how the enmeshment is there, you don't feel the gross yet. The gross is how we recognize it in ourselves, that we've like this worldview has enmeshed in such a way with our trauma that we don't even recognize it as trauma anymore. So I had to write that down, that where that gross came from, because I feel that, because I can't have a worldview that simply coddles my trauma. That's not the right worldview. That's not, can't be.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, it's amazing. And a couple of things I want to say is like how the green idea was perfect to repress my anger. Like, Dan shared about this already, like how we have to be nice, compassionate, understanding, and like be nice at all costs. Everyone's equal. It's all right. Just, just okay. It's okay. Don't just, just keep it quiet or whatever it is. And that kind of energy that I really took on, that felt really right and felt really true for me, and I could live by it. But at the same time, I could really push my anger down and not feel it, which I was so unconscious of, really. And more reason to defend it, because because that's the last thing I want to feel is the anger, right? And I do anything to avoid that, and that just comes all projected out into the world, like, and then you're doing this me and all that. What I'm saying is, don't let me ever feel this or something like that, and then just that thing comes, and so that really helped. Just helps the whole repression, like a collective repression, like that happens, like we all just do it together. And this is where I want to kind of talk about how I've talked about this with you, Scott, before, about the victim attracts victim, like the community thing. Because the reason why I like someone or I like this community, because most of the time I was seeing the world from my trauma and my heart, right? So anything that attracts me is like, you're hurt, I am too. Like, we have understanding now. And they shouldn't have done this to me. They shouldn't have done this to you. And that's, and that's what I think the Melo mean by, if you haven't processed it, you can't stand on your feet, because you're always going to be connecting people through traumas, right? And that's how I made friends, people who play the same game as I do. Because people who has to repress anger, they're friendly, they're nice, they're compassionate, and never boundaries. It's okay, it's all that stuff. So, and when me in the community, when everyone starts to do that, we start moving with the whole movement of that trauma. One thing happens, let's say, I'm sorry this happens to you, or you shouldn't have done this to me. We can all jump on that wagon to attack somebody or make someone a bad wolf, whatever it is, because we reacting is from our trauma, from our victimhood. Whatever I feel so true about, these people are wrong or these people are racist, all that was just my trauma reaction, nothing else. And that it was really hard pill to swallow sometimes, because I didn't know how hard I was. But when I really start to see it, that was just the whole movement. And I had to basically put everything on the chopping block to look, what am I not seeing? What am I not seeing that is not trauma? And there wasn't much left. Pretty much I was moving from that space to feel safe. And that's how we get together. That's how I got into communities, so yeah. And you can see that. And just back to what you were saying, Dan and Scott, about how I can see that, because I've seen that in myself. I've worked on myself and I can see it, and I can still feel the residue of it. And that feels gross, because I know what's going on. I feel it in myself. And that's when I have to speak up, or that's when we start to kind of, because if I don't speak up, it just, or if I don't process it, it's too much, and I'm sure a lot of people start to feel this as you do that repression work. We all have it in us, and we all been through it. That's why we know we identify with it, so yeah.
That's good. I'm glad you guys are bringing some of this up. Because the question is, how do we wake up out of it? I think we're talking about waking up out of the victim consciousness, and because that's the linchpin of that. It's like the victim, like legitimately victims of the powers that be through. So, not legitimately in terms of that's who we really are, but like that's the response that we've had from. And so then it brings up, how do you get out of this stage? How do you take these high principles and not stay stuck here and stay sick here? And I want to talk about shadows. So what I see at the green stage where we get stuck is that it's our shadows partly to keep us stuck there, including the authority shadow. But Okay, so not everybody who's in green or even stuck in green is an anger repressor. We know that. But there's a lot of us here. Like there's 3 of us right here, former anger. So that tells you something. And talking about green. So the shadows with the anger repressor who gets stuck in green, we can generalize okay here because we've seen it enough to know that there's some common shadows. And it has to do with big energy. And that's what keeps us small at sick green, I think. Big energy is out there. It's just a trigger. I'm either drawn to it or I'm triggered by it. In any case, I can't be it. So I have to stay small. And that's like holding myself back, emotional repression, all coming from trauma. And then by keeping the shadows in place, I don't move out of that because I can't. Because if I move out of that big energy, I might be the abuser. I might be seen as that. Or I'm going to be arrogant. I'm going to become my shadow. I'm going to be seen as a narcissist. And what I tell people is you will be, because you will get those shadows. I have, but you just keep processing because it's just the way the shadow thing works. You have to move through it, because that's what we have to do. The people that are stuck in that stage have to shadow out to hold their anger and other emotions back. They just have to because they're stuck. They have to do that. When they're ready, they'll start owning those shadows and they'll come out of repression and they're going to show up differently. And then they're going to be the thing that the others shadow in green. The ones that are still stuck will shadow at them until we all come out of green. But we have to see the process that the shadows have to be dealt with, because just trust me, if you do repression work, everything that was a shadow, you're going to become the target of it in some way. Maybe not all of your shadows, but a lot of them. But that's how we move out of green, because we have to be the authority of our own experience. If we're not, we can't move out of green, is the way I can see it. So we have to deal with the authority shadow, for example, or any version of the big energy that we have. The angry, the narcissist, all these shadows have to be dealt with at green. What do you guys, I know you guys have something to say about that, because we do a lot of shadow work.
Yeah. I mean, I can say a lot about that. The authority shadow. So one of the biggest reactions I've had in my system when I'm doing inquiry is we have a thing called reverse inquiry that we do in the work, where it's basically like you're provoking you're programming, you're provoking the ego into reacting, right? So the reverse inquiry would be something like, if you feel not good enough, you'd say, well, I am good enough. And the body would go, no, you're not. And then would give you a bunch of evidence to the contrary, right? So one of the biggest reactions I had was looking at, these guys, because I used to get really triggered by like the patriarchal folks, like the Donald Trump, like I was talking about, or any of these rich white guys, and and I can include probably my dad in there because he was more dominating. He was sort of like always just felt like he had his boot on the back of my neck, sort of when I was a kid, that type of thing. So anyways, one of the biggest reactions was I said, it's okay to be like them. It's okay to be dominating, to be aggressive, to be authoritarian, to be, and my whole body just was like, no, it was like, no, reject that, like not gonna happen, and here's the irony. That no was basically saying, no, do not be like them. You have to repress your power. You have to repress your anger. You have to repress your masculinity. You have to repress anything that out there that represents. You have to push that down. That's a huge no. And that had been happening for 35 years in my body. Basically, is that movement of like, no, don't push it down, hide it, So,
By the way, can
because
I
of
just say right here that no wonder we're all identified with deficiency stories. That's what I've been saying, because we're pushing down all these things. But go ahead. Like we come to spirituality all identified with these deficiency stories because we're pushing down what's true for us. I just have to keep saying that, like what Dan is saying. Like this is the source of our suffering. What he's saying right here, holding ourselves back, even if it's anger or power. Go ahead. Sorry, Dan. I had to say that.
No, it's perfect. That's exactly it. Because for all those years, I had to be identified with the stories like I'm unsafe, or I'm unwanted, or I'm not good enough, or these deficiency stories, so that I didn't have to go down and access and start to feel and express my power, my anger, my voice, like who I was, so much that it became like compulsive, that was just running unconsciously in the body. It's just constant 24 hours a day. Just don't show up this way. Don't show up this way. You have to show up as like sensitive and kind and, you know, all the sick green stuff. It's like you have to be this way. Meanwhile, you're all the stuff that's been pushed down in the body, there's just rage there, you know? So yeah, I mean, Toshi, did you have something you wanted to? Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we have to kind of start talking about how we seek safety all the time, right? What is safe for them? What is safe for them? What, you know, we have hierarchies of safeties basically. And yeah, we project that, and then, you know, obviously it's safer to believe something that in first dimension, which is, you know, we talk about the map of first dimension, you know, what we see without prompting anything. It's safer to believe that I've got a pain, safer to believe that it's your fault, the triggers, safer to believe that shadows, you know, it's their problem, all that stuff. It's safer to believe that, you know, I have this condition or whatever it is, right? But underneath that, which is second dimension, which is, you know, it's safer than the third dimension, but still, you know, it's hidden and it's unconscious. But we kind of sense it, we move with it, we are consciously fully believe it. So we can't even see our thoughts until you start doing the work, really. But you know, if you're in the KI world, it's kind of easy to see deficiency stories. But most people, they believe it so much that I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, but they forgot, they can't see it. Because if you believe it, you can't see your thoughts, right? So about it anyway. So, but then that's second dimension. It's unconscious, but it's still easy and still safer to believe in those things, which is like, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. And then it's crazy to even, you know, suggest this for me 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's like, what do you mean I'm safer for me to believe I'm a failure? But it really is when you really start to look, because there's something in stories, that there's something that there's a utility. We haven't really talked about utility. We should really talk about it, because that's when we really start to uncover the reason why we have to seek safety, I guess, you know. So, but then I'll just carry on the map. So the second dimension is about the stories and, you know, what we believe ourselves to be, and the identification and the identity of who we are, right? But underneath that, there's emotions that we don't really want to feel, which is the third dimension, which when we were growing up, for me, I had to repress anger, because every time anger came up, I identify with violence and, yeah, just not love, basically. And that's how I saw it. You know, I used to be beaten a lot when I was growing up. I was like, I never want to be like them. But I also had weird identification with it. So I was fully identified with it. So I had to repress it. Because if I'm not identified with it, like sadness so much, then, you know, I wouldn't care about it much, right? But because I believed it, that anger is not allowed, I fully believed it. My first biggest landing of all time, push it down. And then that, and everything stemmed from that. So I would do anything to not feel that. Because if I can't express my anger, that means I can't be myself. That means there's something wrong with me. Here comes your stories on top of that, right? I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. So that's the third dimension we don't want to feel. But there's a fear, what we call frozen fear, that is, we call it, you know, the most, not much thing safer than frozen fear, really. So the fear of expressing your primary, which is, for me, it would be an anger. There's a fear to express the anger. And that's what I feel every time I get anger. Then I have to push it down. I have things to push it down. Commands and thoughts and many programs, basically, what we call repression programs. So yeah, so that's kind of map in a nutshell. I don't know why I went there, but yeah, that just came out of me. So yeah.
Well, that's actually a good point right there, because that's the KI, the work that we're doing in the dimensions. I think that what he's saying is, like, some people don't know, because I said we all have deficiency stories, and Toshi made the point that we're not all conscious of it. Like, we know that we believe this about, but here we can make it conscious, that deficiency story. But what I'm saying is, even when you make it conscious, and what Toshi's saying is, it's driven by the trauma and repression. So KI focuses on that point. And I don't think we need to go like from here on around the method, because it's out there for us. Anybody who wants to learn it, right? But here's what I want to ask, because I have you guys here. When else would I be able to ask you this? Because I know that there are people listening who will be like thinking, because the repression scares us. You know, its job is to scare the shit out of us. Don't be yourself, basically. So we're talking about doing inquiry to be ourselves, to reverse the repression, to heal the trauma, and to get out of any stuckness we have around this thing. So, but what about this? What about these questions? Answer any of them that you want. How will I vote? Here's a question. Because, so many of us, we vote based on energy and trauma, even, or conditioning, even though we don't realize it. And it's become less and less conditioned around victimhood, repression, and whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Because people might think, oh, if you guys are waking up out of green, you must be becoming conservative. Like those questions. No, I'm not actually. I'm not voting all conservative. But like people ask that all the time. Like, how would I vote if I don't know what I really stand for energetically? Like what I'm really mad about. How will I know? And then the other thing is, what if I become, I'm afraid of becoming what I'm afraid of, right? So just like I said, and so have you guys encountered that your worst fears have come true, that you're a really, really mean, awful person? Tell me, like, because people are worried about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I've not become a really mean, awful person. I think I've become more present and more compassionate and more myself as I've done this, as I've brought the repressed anger and power and stuff back online, but that's the fear. That's what the mind says during the whole process. That's what I was saying about, I looked at Trump and these white guys and dad and all that stuff, and my body went, no, don't be like them. And Toshi said that's the way that my system has been trying to keep me safe by pushing down all of that stuff. But the irony is I've been repressing my power, my anger, all that stuff. But since I've been repressing it, it's been down there roiling for years, and I've become identified with it. So I actually already am like the people that I'm triggered by, but I just don't know it. I'm just pretending that I'm, whatever. That's the covert narcissism. Like I'm smiling and I'm happy and spiritual and all this stuff, right? But really down here, it's like, oh, I fucking want to kill and hate everybody and all this, So, anyways, bringing that stuff online, making that stuff conscious. There's a fear. The mind goes, oh, you're going to become like them. But really, what happens is you're just clearing the body of the old anger. You're clearing the system and emptying it of the old residue that's been built up for so long. So I always tell people it's like what if you had been sick and you hadn't blown your nose for like 35 years? I mean, if you just, so you've got all this stuff, just snot, just built up in your system and everything, and then you start blowing your nose and you go, oh, but if I blow it too much, then I'm going to be a bad person. It's like, no, you just need to clear the body of the old stuff. This isn't about identity, but the mind, of course, wants to take it to identity, or to keep us safe, to try to like grasp onto something that we can believe about ourselves. But the cool thing now is like, the more I come out of repression, the more I'm like, I don't have to believe anything about myself. I don't have to believe that I'm good or bad. I don't have to believe that I'm unsafe or unwanted, or that I'm good enough or powerless or powerful or whatever it is. It's because as that stuff gets cleared and I integrate more and I really like, it just feels like I've become more authentically myself, and it's more like, I tell people usually it's more like, I feel more like Forrest Gump than I do feel like what my mind says, which you're going to become like the Joker from Batman or something, where there's this evil, crazy, dominating person. It's like you're more sort of just yourself and sweet and in the moment. And so anyways. Yeah.
I like that. Toshi, it's our last one, so feel free to share anything, Toshi.
Yeah, so great questions. I want to answer that about, how would you vote or anything, how would you make any decisions? Well, I have to talk about freedom and safety now because, did I have a choice to vote or not before? Safety was choosing, let's say, well, choice is we can get too non-dual, but do we have a choice or not? We have to put that to a side now. I think it's both. So let's say, because I was reacting from my trauma, I didn't have a choice to vote for anything else but this, because I was scared. That's what it is, right? And that choice comes back. So if I was being over compassionate about some minority people or gay rights or anything else, I didn't have a choice. I had to do it for my safety so I can feel better about myself, whatever it is. So I didn't have to feel my anger, right? But when that starts to fall away, I have a choice to do that or not, right? So I can really go for the compassion without choosing safety, and that feels amazing. Like
Yeah.
I can really vote for someone that really just without trying to be safe, without from fear. So that's that you know, that choice comes up. Can I choose freedom or safety? Because I could only choose safety for my program. I had to choose this, and I didn't know I was making those choices. Well, it wasn't a choice. There was no choice to even to kind of to make the right decisions or anything. So, and if there's any idea like what Scott was saying, so are we just going to become really angry people because we don't repress anger? But that's what the repression says, because that's what keeps it down. That's all it is. Anything that comes out that you feel true is there for you to believe that you can't express this anger. You know, I'll be the last one to know what anger really is, because all I knew was to repress anger, right? So of course it's going to be explosive, dangerous, and violence, right? That's all I knew. But as I start to really be with my anger as part of myself, as part of the movement of Toshi or whatever you want to call it, it's not what I ever thought the repression thought it was, because all repression is just a reason to push it down. It's nothing else. It's not an opinion. It's just a reason to push it down, if you want to look at it. It's not an opinion. Yeah, it's not, I keep saying it's not an opinion. So I didn't have a choice in anything. But now when it starts to fall away, you can, like, yeah, I can really be angry. I can really people please, because people pleasing was one of the repression programs, right? So I had to people please all the time. I didn't have a choice. I had to make sure, you know, I was a nice guy all the time to keep this down. But now when that starts away, it's not like I don't people please, but when I want to, I can, like, really cleanly, like, without trying to get anything out of it. And then I can just be sharp or whatever I want. It's just, you get that choice back. So it's more like I'm getting everything back that I thought I couldn't be myself when you're coming out of repression. It's not about opposite of what's being repressed you're gonna do. It's not about opposite. It's not about safety. It's about freedom. Like this way. I don't know how, you know, it just opens up to more potential and mysteries and more I don't knows. Is my answer. Yeah.
That's great note to leave it on. So I was going to say, I don't want to say, I always tell people where to go. Everybody knows by now where to go to do the work. I mean, we deal with these issues in the members area, and we won't say much more about it, but like anywhere where there are people doing spiritual work, these issues are relevant. So if you want to join us in the members area to actually learn how to do it, go to the pinned post at the top of my Facebook page or go to kilby.com. And also you've got Dan and Toshi here, great trainers, because these are really sticky issues. Like they're not so easy to navigate. As a non-dual teacher for years, a lot of these issues eluded me, repression, trauma. So if they elude you and if you like resonate with this, but you like, I don't know how to go. Well, we didn't either. We had to like discover it ourselves. So if you want to work with Toshi or Dan, just tell everybody how to reach you guys for training or working real quick before we go.
Yeah, so I'm Toshi, and yeah, I'm training people in all dimensions, and yeah, I also facilitate as well. If you want to be radical, if you want to get direct to your issues or whatever, and yeah, just let's not beat around the bush, let's get to it, you know, then yeah, just come and see me.
Yeah, same here. And you can find both of us we're both on kilby.com under the facilitators tab. So yeah, and I'm working with folks one-on-one in sessions and also training people. And yeah, if this fires you up and you feel earnest and excited about it, then yeah, come talk to us. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.